One of the platitudes that I heard also often in the early stages of my own divorce was, "It does get better." And I knew at the time I just sort of sloughed that off because it didn't ring true. It's like, how can you know that it's going to get better? You have no idea what I'm currently dealing with. You don't know what my future holds. How can you say that? But now, 10 years out, I find that that's something that I often say. And I don't mean it as a platitude, because when people write to me and they tell me all about what they're currently dealing with, I don't just read those words, I feel those words. I find myself going back in time to when I was in a similar place. And then I think about where I am now, and I realize all of those moments from then to now, and how little by little it really did get better. Now, one of the most important things to understand is getting better doesn't mean that it's ever going to be like it didn't happen. Instead, I like to compare it to an oyster and a pearl. See, the way a pearl forms is that a grain of sand gets into the oyster, and it's an irritant, it's sharp. And so what that oyster does is it slowly wraps that grain of sand in calcium deposits, smoothing over those rough edges. And that pearl stays in the oyster. That grain of sand is still within, but yet it's no longer so sharp, so painful. Now it's just something that you learn how to live with and that you can make space around. It's amazing how much of the pain of divorce comes down to our discomfort and fear of change. Change is hard. Change is really hard. But what happens is you start to adapt. No matter what it is, you begin to get used to it. And what was once so new, so strange, so alien, so uncomfortable, well, now you know how to deal with it. So it's no longer quite so big of a deal. Then there's time. Time softens and blurs. You're definitely going to have some memories that stay sharp and stay ever present, especially those memories that are tied to especially strong emotions. But some of those others, they really do start to fade. And let them go. It's okay. You don't need to hold on to the clarity of every little moment. And as those memories fade, they become a little more like a backdrop instead of your focus. Time also gives you the opportunity to fill in the voids. You know, in those early days after divorce, you've got so much missing from your life, so many gaps that once were filled by your marriage or by the life that you had. And so you have so much missing and you're focusing on that emptiness. But over time, you fill in those voids, you fill in those spaces. More people and things and activities come into your life. And so you're full again. And you're no longer so aware of what was lost. When it first happens, the divorce is abrupt. You know, it's sort of like a movie cutting off right in the middle. But as time goes on, you start to weave your story around it, and it becomes less who you are and more a thing that is part of your life, part of your story. Eventually, you also get through all of the firsts. And that can take some time. You know, some of those are tied to the calendar. You know, the first anniversary, the first birthday, the first Christmas. And those are hard. And they're also anticipated. Then there's those ones that sort of surprise you, you know, when you aren't thinking about it and you end up at a certain restaurant again for the first time. Or one that I found was buying a house, ended up sort of triggering some of those first feelings again. But after a while, you've gone through all of those And after you've been through the first anniversary of each thing, it no longer carries so much weight. And this one's backed by science. We all have what researchers like to call a happiness set point. And when things happen to us, either good, like winning the lottery, or bad, like divorce, we do eventually return to the same happiness set point that we were at before. And so even though you experience this major dip in well-being, you do eventually get back to the place you were before. Now, personally, I actually find that it's a little bit better because you are at the same place again, but with more gratitude for getting there. Over time, your emotional response also lessens. I relate this to a situation I had years ago. I skidded on some black ice and my car did a few spins on the exit ramp of the interstate. And I was completely fine. The car was totally fine, but I was shaking and quite distraught by the time I got home. Now, this particular exit ramp is one I take every day on my way home from work. And the next time I had to take it, it was pretty rough. I found myself shaking even before I started down the exit ramp. And then I kept telling myself, you're okay, you're safe. And the next day, well, it was a little bit easier. And the next day, easier still. And after a few weeks, well, I didn't even think anymore about that skid because I had had so many experiences doing the same where I was safe. And that's what happens with our emotional responses with anything. Right now they're probably pretty jumpy. They're waiting for, that metaphorical tiger to come out and attack. But as you keep going and you learn to trust that you are okay, that you are safe, you're no longer going to be quite so heightened emotionally. And then there's the biggies. Gratitude is one of those. Maybe you can get to a point where you're actually grateful that this happened to you. Not for the pain that it caused, not for the relationships damaged, for the impact that it had on others, but for some of the wisdom that it gave you, for some of the opportunities that maybe you now see, for the strength and belief that you now have in yourself. And then the ultimate, and that's finding purpose from all of this. Because once you can find purpose from whatever has happened to you, it puts it in a whole new light. Because then you no longer see it as that bad thing. Instead, it's that thing that drives you. It's that thing that encourages you to do better, to be better. So regardless of your particular situation or where you are in this, I want you to know it really does get better. The way that you feel right now is not how you are always going to feel. One day, you too are going to be able to look back and say, wow, I have come so far.